Alrighty, let's talk about Spell Reflect in dungeons and how you can use them and how it's good for you. So, first we should talk about Spell Reflect a little bit. It is a 25-second cooldown, 20% magic reduction that lasts for 5 seconds, meaning every minute, roughly, you can have this up for 15 seconds. But you'll have to split the difference. So that's, let's say, at 10 seconds every minute, right? That is a 1/6 duration, which means that you have about a 12.6 repeating uptime of this if used consistently. So that is a 20% DR on a about 13% uptime if you just spam it, which is good. But if you use it efficiently, it can even be more valuable for you. And first and foremost, we are going to go into Throne of the Tides. What I planned for on the later videos, I tried to go back and get a Throne of the Tides VOD that I had. But when I changed over my Twitch settings, so my Spotify playlist wouldn't be put in the Twitch VODs and then wouldn't be muting the fucking videos I'd put over to Twitch, or put over to YouTube, it reset my bitrate, and I was at like a 2,000 bitrate, and it looked like mud. Like, you couldn't tell anything. So I fixed that, but now I don't have any VODs to use. So we're going to do this for Throne of the Tides, and then hopefully either I'll use my own, or I should have VODs of the other dungeons I want to talk about, and then we can just kind of skim through them, and I can talk about each thing, right? But for now, we're going to go do this with Throne. And we're going to talk about specifically how you can use Spell Reflect, because Spell Reflect's a good spell. So first and foremost, we have our first little pack here. This pack is completely fine if you get targeted by the Oracle to Spell Reflect any of the damage it sends your way. It's mainly a lot of melee mobs. The Snapdragons can target you. You can just stun them. If you stun them, it doesn't stop their pursuit. You can, but it just means you don't get the bleed on you as often. But you're free to reflect pretty much whatever she casts in this pack. Make sure to kick the heal. And if people's kicks or downs, you can reflect the bolt cast as well. If this pack is about to die, I would much rather you kick or stun the Oracle rather than reflect towards the end of it because of the Sentinel. The Sentinel has an ability called Crushing Depths, and this ability lasts 30 seconds and can be reflected. I have done over 2 to up to 2.5 million damage. If this Sentinel decides to cast this on you early, then you get a ton of damage from it. You remove the heal absorb from yourself. So focus on kicks and stuns on the oracles here, but try and save your Spell Reflect for the Crushing Depths cast, because especially even a week now, like bursting, if you get that heal absorb and then you're even killing a couple mobs and they're just bursting, the healer can't really keep up and you kind of just die. But the healer can do something about it if you don't have that heal absorb on you. So these Sentinels, which we'll see later on in the dungeon as well, save your Spell Reflect for them, because it is very important. It does a lot of damage to the mob. This mob has very high health and will save you a significant amount of pain. Right? Going on to the Ravager mobs. They have this volatile bolt that they put an AoE on the ground. You don't want to be in that ever. Don't think about Spell Reflecting. Can't do shit with it. The Acid Barrage, as you can see, one of the things Mythic Dungeon Tools is actually really great for is you get to see these spells and the spell IDs of these spells, which means you can actually see what kind of damage they do. Spell Reflect only works on magic. So, the boss has to physically turn to cast Acid Barrage. You can try and pre it if you would like to. I think it's actually better. The dot doesn't do as much damage as the initial hit. So if you see the boss turning towards you, feel free to send Spell Reflect, because it will just not reflect the damage, but it will certainly negate a lot of the upfront damage of that ability by 20%, which is good. Sometimes it might not pick you, but hey, if it does, you got that mitigation. There's nothing else in this pack to Spell Reflect. Now we go up the stairs. Generally, people are going to be pulling all these little greebly grobblies with these two mobs. Sometimes I've seen people chain these two into this. I wouldn't really recommend it. I would rather get this all killed off before you roll into the double sentinels. But once again, I'd say feel free to spell reflect these two mobs if they're casting on you. There is this witch has a lightning surge cast, which charges a random bolt with lightning, causes the target to inflict damage to themselves and nearby players. It's a circle that she puts on you. This is an instant cast, so you don't actually have a way to discern and reflect it. It can be reflected. I have done it before. But because it is random, you might end up actually sending your spell reflect on nothing if you try and catch it. So, because of that, I would recommend only reflecting targeted abilities at you from these two. But once again, like the other pack, because you're about to go into the Sentinels, if you're about to kill these, don't reflect at the last minute. Use your kicks, use your stuns, use your fears to disrupt their casts instead of using your reflect before this pack, right? So this pack, once again, double Sentinel. This Crushing Depths will do a ton of damage and save your healer a lot of the heal absorb when you're running with this pack. They recently also changed this, I should have mentioned this with the first one, that these Sentinels no longer can be LOS'd. You used to be able to use these pillars on the sides here and down here to actually LOS the Sentinel heal absorb cast, but you can't do that anymore. But for warriors, now we don't care, and it's still a boon for us. So that if they cast it on us, you don't have to run away, you don't have to LOS, just reflect that shit and you're good to go, right? Ton of damage, do a bunch of damage to the mobs, that's good. This next pack here, there are no Sentinels until this last pack. So if you're being casted on in any of these packs, feel free to kick the lightning bolts or the water bolts from the, where's an oracle? Or the water bolts from an oracle. Feel free to just reflect those. A lot of the times people probably stop kicks, and they will probably stop a kick that you might be reflecting. It's just going to happen. It is what it is. But the reflect value here is going to be just reflecting these mobs. Make sure you're kicking the heal. Make sure you're kicking and stunning lightning bolt as much as you can. One thing that is good about a melee kick is it's a lot shorter cooldown than other kicks like ranged have. Evokers have a 40-second kick. A lot of casters have 40 seconds. I think hunters have 24. But melees have 15, and depending on how you talent, can go down to 13. But you generally don't take those talents because they're a damage loss. So make sure you're using your melee kick, because you're ranged and your healer, and I think priest even has to talent into their kick, which is fucking nuts. So make sure you're using them, right? Got to use your kicks, got to use your CC. If you have something casting on you, feel free to let it reflect it and then kick the next one. But other than that, make sure you're kicking stuff. Once again, we have the Ravager here. You have a lot of value with the Acid Barrage because it does a lot more upfront damage than the dot damage afterwards. So try and pre-reflect that if you can. The side packs, same thing. You've got casters. Kick them, reflect them, good to go. And then this pack, you have 2 casters and a sentinel. You will probably be very tempted to reflect one of the oracle casts, right? Spell reflect in packs like these is very weird because this guy normally casts this maybe once, maybe twice. And if he doesn't pick you, then you just didn't spell reflect it. But I still believe that being able to hold and reflect this is more important. I mean, unless you're going to die from a cast, you can reflect, obviously. But being able to reflect this ability rather than it being put on you is far more of a boon than anything else. There's only 2 kicks required in this entire pack. The Witch and the Oracle. These guys do melee, this guy does melee. So within a group of 5, you shouldn't have too much trouble, right? You can kick one of these mobs to bring it in, you can stun the other one, your teammates have a lot of stuff to do, right? So feel free to just say hold spell reflect, kick stun the other mobs, you're good to go. First boss. These mobs cast Frostbolt, but they don't do that much damage. One thing that I'm not sure of, that's always very weird with bosses that spawn mobs, is that these mobs I don't know if they scale with Tyrannical or Fortified. I shrimply don't know. But realistically, even in the Tyrannical keys I've been doing, the tank has been like, hey man, you can let the frost bolts go off. Realistically, what you're probably going to want to do is don't use Reflect during the ad phase, right? Don't use Reflect during the ad phase. Just kick the mob, help your tank group them, kill them down. Be careful of this guy's Trident Flurry Frontal, right? That's all you got to worry about. But do not send your spell Reflect, because we need to talk about the boss and what you can reflect on it. This boss does a ton of damage, like a crazy amount of damage. I have multiple times during this boss had the boss send either the Shock Blast or been hit by the Focus Tempest twice in a row and just instantly died. On the keys I'm doing of Tyrannical that are like 22, 23, the Focus Tempest is hitting like 650k, right? I think on the 22 it was hitting for 620 or 630 and then 650. But that's damage you can use, right? Now we're getting into good Spell Reflect usage. Because Spell Reflect, we see it go ability by ability, right? This boss casts a kickable water bolt cast. Don't try and reflect this, just kick it. This boss has a Shock Blast cast. You cannot kick the Shock Blast. However, if you're in a pinch, you can use Spell Reflect to actually negate some of the damage coming into you. It does a lot of damage, but it does nature, right? So you can, but what you're going to want to use Spell Reflect for is Focused Tempest. Focused Tempest, let's read here. Continues a Focused Tempest that lashes out at players, inflicting 40k nature damage to a random target and jumps to additional players for reduced damage. Reflect can do a couple things here. One, if you reflect the first hit, because Focus Tempest can either hit somebody else and chain to you, or it can hit you first and chain to somebody else. If you reflect the first hit of Focus Tempest completely random, it will just reflect the damage at the boss and not hurt other people. Massive, massive. If someone else gets chained, and then their chain lightning hits you, you can't spread for this. It just happens, right? You can't spread for it. You will reflect it and do the reduced damage back to the boss. So you can do anywhere from a reflect cast between 600 to 250k, depending on which one you get hit. But it also gives you a lot of damage resistance for the rest of the Focus Tempest cast. You want to reflect at the start, and hopefully get a primary reflect, but if you don't, you'll probably reflect a secondary reflect and reduce a significant amount of damage taken to you. There's a different way you can also use reflect on here, because the way the boss cast sequence works, you will not have spell reflect for every Focus Tempest. Generally, every other Focus Tempest you'll have a spell reflect for. So you can use reflect in two ways, and I'm almost debating the second way of using reflect here, which is you can be very unlucky with Focus Tempest. At a high key level, I have had the Focus Tempest hit a teammate and then hit me. I have already reflected at this point, right? So we're in there. I've already reflected. My reflect is on cooldown. The Focus Tempest has hit my teammate, hit me for 240k, and then main targeted me the next pulse for 650 and killed me instantly within like a 1 second period. So you can do. So this is where, instead of using our health pot, instead of being worried, instead of calling for defensives, this is where we can actually take a bit more advantage in our health pool and how we use it, right? If you get main targeted or get hit with somebody else's laser, I've started the idea that I think you should save Spell Reflect for partway through the Focus Tempest cast until after you've taken damage from something. Focus Tempest will not one-shot you, but if it chains to you and then hits you main, or hits you main and then chains to you right after, it can kill you, not giving your healer enough time to actually heal you up at all. So, using Spell Reflect, I think I've changed my perspective on how I actually want to use it with this ability. Where the first time you take damage from Focus Tempest, then you reflect. Because after you've taken damage, you can reflect the next damage instance and take no damage, giving your healer time to heal you up, potentially saving your life. And because you're not going to have Spell Reflect up for the Focus Tempest afterwards anyway, that means that the next Focus Tempest, you can save your Impending Victory, your Health Pot, potentially using Die by the Sword. Hey man, even Defensive Stance. During that high damage phase, I've even started using, personally, Ignore Pain in my high dungeon counts, because I just simply need to live, right? So, because of this, excuse me, because of this, using Focus Tempest using Spell Reflect to keep yourself alive from this Focus Tempest cast, especially in Tyrannical, I think is the best way to use it on this fight. Because it is the one RNG mechanic that can actually just screw you over. The only other time where I think you should use your Spell Reflect first is there is a Shock Blast Focus Tempest overlap. The boss will cast Shock Blast. It can go on you. And if it goes on you, do not Spell Reflect the Shock Blast damage. The boss will Shock Blast you, you'll take a bunch of damage, and then we'll start casting Focus Tempest. After you get Shock Blasted, you can come back into the boss, use your Impending Victory to heal, and Spell Reflect to guarantee that you are not going to die from the next initial hit if she main targets you. Even if the boss off-targets you at that situation, your healer should have healed you up enough, but if you're still low, then you have your health pot for that later situation and that later overlap in the fight. If you would have wasted your health pot earlier by using your Spell Reflect on the initial cast to Focus Tempest, instead of saving it to save you from damage during the cast, then if you would have wasted health pot there, you would not have it for this potential overlap in later parts of the fight. That is why using it correctly is going to be very important for your longevity in these keys, right? And this is just talking about the first boss. Just the first boss, right? So, that's a lot. We've talked about the boss, we've talked about the ads, and, well, we're just past the first boss, right? Well, we're now right to the second boss. There isn't really a lot to Spell Reflect here. Your Spell Reflect is going to be used on Festering Shockwave. It does shadow damage and puts a shadow damage dot on you. If you use it right before the shockwave goes off, you'll negate 20% of the shockwave damage, and for the next 5 seconds, 20% of the dot, which your healer should be able to heal you up from. So this is the only value you're really getting from Spell Reflect here. I'm not really going to talk about anything else in the boss other than stack with everybody else, stack the ooze. Somebody who's got a spammable way to knock the ooze back. The ooze gets knocked back on damage. So just let your party deal with the ooze. Make sure you mitigate the shockwave, Spell Reflect. You're good to go, right? Now coming into these mobs, Shadow Smash, you're not going to want to get hit with anyway. This is essentially built to kill you. Don't try to Spell Reflect this. It won't work. This, as you can see, is just a pull. And this is just a pull, and you're not going to reflect this. I don't even know if you can, but it's not worth it even if you tried. So don't reflect this. Reflect has a little bit of value against these mobs. You can reflect the Mind Flay, and if you reflect the Mind Flay, the mob essentially Mind Flays itself for the full duration. So if you see somebody Spell Reflect it, or you yourself Spell Reflect Mind Flay, the mob will still be casting it, but it will just be damaging itself. So don't kick the mob after you've reflected the Mind Flay, let it murder itself. Spell Reflect also has a little bit of additional value on the mobs around it. These minions of Gersha, they just do a Psionic Pulse. They cast it. This cast is stunnable if you want to reduce the amount of overall AoE damage your group is taking. But let's say you're going into this pack, you've killed this guy, there's a couple of these little guys left. Normally these have been cleaved down by now, but you can use Spell Reflect to just mitigate some of that AoE damage because it is Shadow, right? It is the same thing for these Mind Flayers. You can reflect them. Same thing for this guy. Same thing for these. You can't reflect anything off the big boys. And this pack here, you're totally fine sending Spell Reflect. Just because there's nothing to reflect until you get to the boss, right? So just reflecting, taking reduced damage from these pulses is good. Now here's where we're getting a little funky. We're getting a little funky because the only spell reflectable ability in this fight is Flame Shock. So Flame Shock is randomly cast on a player. So you could send Spell Reflect and it might not do literally anything. He might just target somebody else. But a single Flame Shock cast, for me, has done over 2 million damage in a 22. So it's very, very worth reflecting the Flame Shock cast. He randomly casts it during the fight. I say he probably casts it like every, I don't know, 6 to 8 seconds, maybe. But one of the times he's essentially guaranteed to cast it, which is the time I generally try and target for, is he will cast Earth Fury, he will put circles beneath your feet, and after his Earth Fury cast is done, within that 2 to 3 second window, he will cast Flame Shock. So normally I use, just to guarantee the timing on it, I will use my Spell Reflect after the Earth Fury cast, because after that 2 to 3 second window, so there will still be swirlies on your feet, right? He will be done casting Earth Fury, but there will still be swirlies down. You have to watch his cast bar, and after Earth Fury is over, then you put your Spell Reflect up. Because if he decides to target you within that time frame, you will be able to reflect it. Because it only takes a couple seconds after this cast is done before he casts again. Obviously, in this one, you can kill the totem. But mainly, this is the big value here for Spell Reflect. But at 25%, the boss summons, the main boss shows up, right? The main Mr. Squiddy Man. He does an AoE that will do basically kill you, so you just LOS it, right? This Mind Rot, however, is something that just bounces around and just does damage to players, right? It's just the raid damage of the last 25% of the fight. Mind Rot can be reflected. So once you get into this last phase, just send Spell Reflect whenever. Because the amount of damage this guy puts out, generally you will reflect Mind Rot. It negates the damage, it sends it back at him. Actually, I don't know if it actually damages him. Spell Reflect is weird where sometimes it'll reflect, negate the damage, but do no damage to the mob you're reflecting to. I don't fully remember if it actually does damage, or maybe just doesn't show on details. But you can reflect the Mind Rot, reduce an instance, or remove an instance of damage on yourself. It's good. It's good. Other than that, we're going here into this pack, these Hunters and the Mages. The Hunters, they're a Poison Spear, which does nature damage. Honestly, if you get targeted by a Poison Spear and you get the debuff, feel free to reflect it to reduce the damage. These Aqua Mages, Aqua Blast cast, will generally do enough damage that you're going to want these kicked. You're going to want them kicked, you're going to want them stunned. Holding Spell Reflect for an Aqua Blast cast that shouldn't go off in the first place. In this pack specifically, there's only 2 mages. These blasts shouldn't go off, so don't use your Spell Reflect for reflecting their blast. Use it for reducing damage from the Poison Spear. Once again, you have 2 Hunters, 2 mages. The mages should be kicked. The Sentinel, however, its Swell cast lasts 6 seconds, and you can reduce almost all... Well, you're not reducing all of the damage, but you can reduce the damage done from Swell by using Spell Reflect. So, once again, you have no other Spell Reflect value other than reducing the damage done from these mobs, so obviously, that's what you should do. It's 20% less damage. It's good. Very, very good. This pack, however, is something you should save Reflect for. You'll have it up most likely after killing the Sentry anyway, but this is a 6 Aqua Mage pack. You can round them up, you can CC, you can kill them as quick as you can, which you should, but there is the off chance people just run out of shit. Depending on the pugs, depending on who wastes something, right? You can run out of picks for these Aqua Blasts, and if you do, that's when Reflect comes into play. You want to make sure that if you get casted on and there's no kick coming to save you, that you reflect the Aqua Blast. It's It's also kind of annoying because you have to be paying attention to what these guys are casting on and who they're casting and if they're going to get kicked or not. So realistically, if it gets down to the last like 1 second cast of Aqua Blast and no one's kicked it yet, feel free to throw Reflect up, try and save yourself, try and reflect some damage, right? Because that's what it's for. That's what it's for. This pack can be very, very dangerous. Once again, you have 2 Sentinels here. You can have good reflect value on the swell casts, so feel free to do that. Last boss. So, the boss spawns these little sludge guys and the big ink blast boys. I think they actually increased the cast time of these mobs. So you should be fine to kick these. If for some reason you can't kick these, you technically could spell reflect it, but what I would save spell reflect for is the blotting barrage. The boss does a putrid roar that does AoE damage and puts a little dot on you, right? But that's not the actual really damaging part of this fight. The blotting barrage, where if you get targeted, you get a purple circle, and you're going to put basically an ink well on the ground that's going to create ink, right? If you stand in it, it does a lot of damage. Generally, after you get hit by this ability, you're going to take a tick of damage from the barrage as well. And it's really deadly and very dangerous and most likely what's going to kill you on the fight. So because of that, if you get the barrage, wait for the cast to go off, reflect to reduce the damage from the barrage and the ground effect afterward. Something that is interesting about this boss that I didn't realize until killing it again recently is you see how it's got this big splotchy effect on it, right? None of this does damage to you unless there's literally a barrage already under the boss, or when one of these ads die. When they die, they leave a little ink pool underneath them as well. But this effect does no damage to you. Nothing. It does nothing. I thought it would fucking kill me, man. But it doesn't. It doesn't do anything. So, if for some reason you need to run through the boss to, like, kick one of these ads and there's no, like, black stuff on the ground, just go through it. Run right through the boss. I have missed a kick because I thought I would die by walking into him because, hey, man, it looks like you would die by walking into him. But this boss, it doesn't do anything. This boss's hitbox doesn't do anything. But most of the value you're going to get, once again, from Spell Reflect is you can technically Spell Reflect the cast from these guys, but realistically, they should be pulled in, they should be kicked, they should be CC'd, silenced, whatever. Because there's nothing else to CC on this fight, like you're not CCing the boss, all CCs should be used on these mobs when they're up, so you shouldn't really be needing to reflect any of their casts. Nor should you reflect Putrid Roar. You mainly want to use Reflect for the Blotting Barrage application, so like when it hits you, and damage so you don't die from the ground effect afterwards, because you generally take a tick from it, right? You can use your Leap to get out in certain situations, but realistically you want to use it for this. And that's, Jesus, 28 minutes. I didn't think it would take that long. But that's Throne of the Tides, man. You get your fun little last boss kill with the little victory lap, and that's it, man. Yeah, there is a lot to Spell Reflect in this dungeon. Something going forward that I think I want to do is if I have a good enough VOD that I can go through, that I have of these dungeons, instead of just sitting here like pointing out things on Mythic Dungeon tools like this, I would rather have a VOD up that I can actually show you what's going on instead. So I will look to do that for the next one. But man, there's a lot more to talk about in this little baby fallopian tube than I thought. You know, there's a lot more to talk about. But hopefully this information is valuable to you. And good luck in your dungeons. And I don't know when I'm going to make the next one. Because I'll probably make one on Blackrock Hold and Murazon's Rise are two that I can probably make because I have enough experience in those dungeons. But it'll probably take me a few more runs in the other dungeons to really understand and get good value on what should be I'll reflect. So, anywho, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good one. Peace.